Hey, StoryMakers! I'm so excited to be with you guys today. It is the holiday season, and we are super pumped up, especially because my friend Sarah is with us on the pod. This is Sarah Copeland, such a great friend, author, mama, all the things, writer, creative, so many beautiful things about Sarah, and I cannot wait for you guys to get to know her. So, hey, Sarah, thanks for being with us today.
Hey Mel, it is so good to be with you. I just love your energy and I can feel it through the screen. I miss being in the same city as you so much.
I know. Sarah and I met ages ago, probably 16 years ago, I would imagine.
Mhm.
And we were both young and thriving, and now we're, mature and creative, and all the things are happening. And so I'm so excited for you guys to get to meet Sarah today. Sarah, you have written how many cookbooks? So
I've
many.
written four. My first book, The Newlywed Cookbook, came out right before my daughter was born, so 14 years ago. She just turned 14 on Saturday. And then my latest book, Instant Family Meals, it came out mid-pandemic, and then I took a pause. So I wrote four in between in about 10 years.
That's so amazing. Well, here at Storymakers, we love to hear about God's big story in all of our lives. And when I look back at my life and I can see all of the creative ways that God has been moving me to shape me to be where I am right now. And so I can only imagine baby young Sarah being formed and shaped in God's beautiful creativity. Sarah, can you just share a little bit about like where you're from and what got you started in the hospitality, cooking, creative writing space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am from Northern Illinois, outside of Chicago. My parents are both Midwesterners. They both grew up on farms in Iowa and Missouri, and then landed in Illinois, where my dad was doing his private practice in medicine. And so we were like really far away from family. Grew up in this incredible family-oriented town, and then my dad was really he's a strong Christian, big creative, big booming personality, and one of the things that he was most attracted to was food and hospitality. And, even though his life was very formulaic in a sense as a physician, he had like gone through the motions. But what we did as a family for fun was go out to eat or, go to downtown Chicago. And he sort of marveled at life. But one of the ways that I experienced it the most was on the plate where he would be like, oh, smacking his lips, like eating things like, oh, honey, when my mom would make a great meal, he'd be like, oh, honey, this is delicious. He just is a big, enthusiastic, what's the word I'm looking for? Like effusive personality. And I'm very similar to him in a lot of ways so that sort of opened my eyes to the magic of hospitality, but I had no intentions of it becoming a career until many, many years later when I moved to New York City in my early 20s, right after college, actually. And I had studied journalism. I was a huge reader, a huge writer. I had studied journalism. And when I landed in New York City, it was like writing and food, just the sort of feeding on the culture of New York City. I got very passionate. So I went to culinary school in my early 20s, kind of married those two things together. Short timeline, I was able to go to France 3 summers in a row,
So amazing.
and study French cooking, live in Saint Tropez and as a private chef, and then came back to New York and kind of wrapped it all together in a food journalism career. So I've always written about food, home, hospitality, lifestyle, nutrition, entertaining, and family, sort of all of those things. And so the cookbooks were a natural next step to sort of package it all in a story that's personal, but also service oriented to help people kind of create the dream life that they want.
That's so cool. Well, I love that highlight about your dad because I think as grown-ups and parents, like as we're parenting our kids, we sort of have this amazing opportunity to offer our kids a freedom, a creative freedom to imagine like something that wasn't exactly, laid out. I mean, because I would imagine 20 years ago, this idea, I mean, now it's there's a lot of people writing and talking about food and travel, but about 20 years ago, I mean, it wasn't what it is now. And I think it must have taken like faith and risk and bravery to kind of like chart this new pathway, because it wasn't a clear roadmap. Would you say, Sarah?
Absolutely. That is so true, Mel. I mean, 25 years ago, basically, I moved to New York, graduated, and when I first came, I mean, there was travel magazines like Travel and Leisure. There were a few, and then there was Gourmet magazine, but there was a few elite jobs there, but there was no one doing their own self story. There was no blogs, there was no podcasting, there was no Substack, any of that. Of course, there was no Instagram. And there were a few writers that I was very, very fortunate. And I feel like God really directed me to the right people. So Dory Greenspan was someone I met very, very early in my career. I was super young. She was so sweet and welcoming, and she had this chic short haircut and her little French scarves and was writing about cooking. But she was also a mother. She also had a young boy, Joshua. People who know her story, she always talked about the kid. But she was able to weave in her story and her family together. So I definitely, and then doors just kept opening. It was a complete God thing for me, because when you look at what I set out to do as a super academic kid, I was a big reader. I was really nerdy. I liked to like deep dive into topics. I went to school originally for pre-med, but it was sort of like, you know, like they say, the Lord works in mysterious ways, and sometimes it's not the lightning flash, it's the whisper. There were just constant, very, very faint whispers, but in many ways it felt like doors just kept opening on this meandering path that I had never even imagined for myself. I mean, I never thought I would move to New York City. Chicago is a great place to live. I had all my family there. I thought I would marry young, have 5 or 6 kids, live close to my parents. I would become a doctor. There was all these things, and then the actual story is so different. All the way till meeting my husband, who's Hungarian, and spending a good portion of our life over there. So I think there was a huge amount of trust. I think probably spiritually that's my superpower, because I came to faith at a very, very young age. I remember 7 or 8 years old, really saying a prayer of, please come and be in my life. And I think I have a lot of weaknesses in my faith story, but my superpower is probably my biggest strength is just absolute faith that one step in front of the other, and God will provide. God will show you the way. He will bring you the people that you need to grow and thrive. You will become the person that other people need to grow and thrive. That it's a very symbiotic co-creation, me, God, people like you, my husband, my children, my parents, all kind of co-creating this magical, beautiful experience.
Yeah. And I think, and ultimately, you're trusting that God's story is a long story. And, I think that we can kind of box God into different categories, but I think we sort of miss the faith opportunity when we forget that God is so creative, like created all the things, colors, beauty, all of
Yeah.
it. And so when we kind of like live into that space for ourselves, then you can just trust knowing that, oh, this is a pathway, and it brings delight to my heart, and I can move into that creative space without feeling that, oh, I'm supposed to be doing this thing. It's like, well, maybe God opened that door for me. Why not? And it's creative, and and feeds who I am as a human. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
I think that's really interesting, because when I moved to New York, which is a hard place to be a believer,
Yeah.
I think that was the place where I can definitely pinpoint back to junior high. My mother is very creative and very devout, but very creative. She sews, and she's a crafter, and she makes things, and she was a wonderful homemaker and a nurse, and threw the best birthday parties you could ever imagine. She was very creative, but I don't think she expressed it in a sense of one of her gifts from God. I think my parents did say, my parents would often say, look around you, look at creation. It's so magical, powerful, beautiful, inventive, just the variety of nature all around you. But I don't think they talked about their own gifts, as creativity wasn't necessarily a forefront value in my family life growing up. And I didn't even realize that it was one of my foremost values until I came to New York, where, you're allowed to be whatever, you're allowed to try whatever. And I think when I came to my parents with this new idea that I was going to go to culinary school and switch things up, and, it was sort of like, well, you already have a journalism degree. And I had a great job out of college working at Glamour magazine. I was later offered a job at Gourmet magazine. And I was like, I want to go and learn the behind the scenes of it. And I think that, again, going back to the trust of the creativity, that the power in questioning, asking these questions is huge. Allowing yourself to have questions, allowing yourself to ask God questions. Like, what is this? Why is this curiosity bubbling in me so much? What is this about? Like, can I explore this? And exploring it with the full knowledge that you're allowed to be curious and effusively alive, not just like you said, not on a
Box.
little perfect straight path. Yeah.
Well, I know it's like when you look at we're always looking at the stories of the Bible, and everybody's story is so wild. It's full of twists and turns. And it's a funny thing that we don't have that expectation for our own personal lives in modern day. And I think, having that flex of trust, I think, can open so many opportunities, and knowing that God's going to land you where you belong. So if you feel like, oh, that was a sideways decision, or maybe I should have gone this different way, God is in the business of reorienting and shaping us and placing us in the right path that where we're supposed to end up, and I think, but when you get to live into the trust space and that faith space, then you have all the fun and curiosity of like exploring your own creativity. And I think that's when the stories really come alive for us. And they feel.
That's really interesting. I had never really thought about, I mean, of course, a lot of times in a sermon, there might be a message like, God used this person who's unexpected, Moses, or, I mean, just so many examples. But
Yeah.
and then you hear that, and someone might say, you can be used too. But it is interesting that I haven't heard it in those exact words. Like, of course, these stories are so twisty and turvy, and there's so many surprises. And why wouldn't it be the same for us? That's such a good point. I love that.
So cool. I also love how curious you are, Sarah. Sarah is super curious, and I love the twinkle in your eye and the wonder that you have for all, you just have a love for other people and the things that they're creating too. And you seem to be so inspired by creativity around you. I remember visiting you when you were the director of food, I think at Real Simple. And
That's right.
you just have this vibe of encouragement and just excitement around what other people are creating alongside you too. And so I think that just lends us, to learn for what the work that you're doing, in that you invite people to your table personally in your micro space, and then you extend that table to all of us through your cookbooks and your words and all of those kinds of things. And so I think as parents, when we're kind of moving through our own, day to day with little kids or teenagers or whoever we have in our home, how can we, Sarah, invite that creativity and that enthusiasm for the people around us in our, maybe our kids or teens or whoever we got around?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. I mean, we have moved, several times. New Yorkers do that. And, even when I was single living in the city, I had always a small apartment, small kitchens. I was always hosting. And it was sort of a way, I wasn't thinking about it necessarily in my younger years as a God-given hospitality opportunity to bring people in. It was just like, was fun. And I love serving people and having people be delighted at the table. And then as I grew, as I aged, and my family story developed, I met my husband. We moved from Manhattan out to Queens, which was a big change for me culturally. 400 square feet. We lived in a 400 square feet apartment, welcomed our first daughter. But I was still having dinner parties, Thanksgiving, birthday parties, everything. And then moving upstate, where we have all kinds of space, we have property, we have land, small house, but we have a big yard. We can have nice big dinner parties and bonfires and stuff like that. But little by little, I've just sort of given myself the grace to say, this is who I am. This is what we have. I'm a big dreamer. I always thought I would have this huge beautiful house with the dining table that seats 12. And we've taken a more creative path. We travel a lot and we do things that sort of put the big house dream on the side. And I think my encouragement is it doesn't matter what your space is, because it's sort of the space you're opening up in your heart that matters. It's how welcome do people feel, how much you can, invite people, even though, that first time is often so magical and fun and nerve wracking. It's the feeling of like people coming through your doors on a regular basis. Now that can be so overwhelming. You have clutter you have to clean up, and then you have to think of the meal. And for me, that's natural and fun, but obviously for some people, they get stumped by it. Like, what will I serve, and how will I make the table nice? And oh my gosh, I only have 4 matching dishes and not 7, or whatever. And I think, again, it's just totally making it feel like a co-creation moment with your friends and your community. So giving people jobs, like, hey, I have these 4 plates. There's 7, there's 3 more bowls over there. Can you grab them and just alternate them on the table? I always, for me, like, we have beautiful furniture. My husband's a furniture designer. So even though we have beautiful furniture, I still always cover everything with a cloth, not so it's fancy. It's just warm. It's very welcoming, because you just feel like you can lay your hands on the table and it's relaxed. I love flowers. I'm not the florist or creative that you are, Mel, by a long stretch, but I often go on just foraging walks and just collect whatever I find in nature, big branches or windy. My kids find these windy. We have this whole cakes, like a big wide platter of found things from the neighbor, from our forest walks. And some of it is just magical and just like, wow, that is so interesting. The shapes, almost like a sculpture. Sometimes that's the centerpiece. Sometimes it's scattered leaves. We just keep it really, really loose so people feel relaxed. And I always give people jobs. Like, even my son, as one of my biggest tips, either for family dinners and for guests, is to light candles. People are so worried about real things, real fire, real whatever. And you can relax, because once people learn how to operate around that, it's such a soothing element. So my son was the candle lighter in our household, because he would get a little overwhelmed when I was having guests over, because I would put a lot of focus on making everything pretty, and a lot of energy is going into it. Maybe a little less energy is going to him on the days leading up to the event or the party. And so I would give him jobs and tasks, even as young as 6 years old. He would light the candles, and it just felt like an important ceremonial thing. So I think if I would like bullet them in 3 things, it would be, just open your doors, whether you feel ready or not. You'll figure out how to do it once you invite. The pressure of like making the invitation can automatically just swing things into action. My second would be to just keep it relaxed, like allow yourself grace. And my third would be to give everyone jobs. If people offer to bring something, don't refuse. Don't say no, no, no. Even if it's their first time, it's fine. Say, oh, that would be so nice, thank you. Or you don't need to bring anything, but if you do, I'd be happy to serve it. Just allowing people to participate takes the pressure off of you. And also, I think what everybody's craving is connection and to be a part of something. And like, for example, with you, Mel, you're so good with decor and color and paint on your walls and flowers. But as soon as you say, hey, Sarah, will you put these into a vase? I'm like, wow, she's trusting me with that. It kind of like lifts your spirit. It inspires you. I can ask questions, but it brings me into your world instead of just standing back in awe of it. It's like this is us creating a moment together.
Yeah, I think that's so important. But this whole seasonality can feel burdensome in some ways, because we feel like we have to do it perfectly, or we have to do it the way our parents did the thing, or whatever the tradition was in the past. But the reality is, it's like you called out, Sarah. It's that we are so thirsty for connection and to be seen in these moments. And I think too, people could feel overwhelmed, or like, do I fit into this space of beauty and creativity? You're really good at it. You're the expert, or well, you say that, but you're really good at it. And the thing is that it doesn't have to be perfect, and all you need are a few elements to like elevate a experience.
Right.
And warmth. I think it's just like, there's so many basic things you can do. But the main thing is that you remain connected and you have that emotional availability to the people in your space. So whether it's your own kids or you're hosting folks for the first time, and we talk about this in Sunday school, it's like what kids want most from us is an emotional connection and just having that sort of that warmth of invitation. And beyond that, it's cherry on top. It's like, oh, well, and they also fed us. That was great too.
Right. Right.
But
I mean, I think,
yeah.
I think of the Martha and Mary story so much from the Bible. It's probably one of the most convicting stories for me because I am a total Martha. Like I am like, get that house in order, put your shoes away. We're going to have a party. It's going to be awesome. This guest of honor is coming. It's not Jesus, but it's someone else wonderful that we love. And my husband is a total Mary. He's like, and my sisters too, like they're there, they're conversating, they're cuddling people. And so even though my nature is very warm and I'm like, give me that baby, I want to hold the baby. But I'm still distracted. I'm emotionally distracted by the perfection that I've imagined. Also, it's a blessing and a curse to have come from 20 years of magazine editing where it's so important. I mean, people talk about this all the time, but it's so important to remember that when you see an Instagram post, when you see a magazine story, I've had my house shot numerous times for magazines and you only see 4 corners of the house because those are the only 4 really beautiful corners.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is one of them that I'm sitting in. If you back it up, it's still beautiful. But right beyond me are 7 pairs of shoes I'd rather not look at, but I'm certainly not going to make you look at them in the magazine, but they're reality. So I think it's really important to remember I have to challenge myself constantly to like put down the thing and go kneel down. I mean, with kids, for me, I'm a kid person. It's easier to be like, come in my arms. You're going to help finish this gravy with me, or we're going to whip the cream together. Let me put a stool up for you. But sometimes it's the grownups who might feel like they need that love and that care. And I have to really challenge myself to show up for that because I'm like, here, I did the thing. I made the beautiful meal and I'm loving on your children and my own children and like, just sit down and enjoy the food. But then the conversations are coming, right? And those are the moments. So on the flip side of hospitality, I really do enjoy going out for a meal with a friend because that's when I can sit down. I've had a great experience the other day where I was sitting with a very new friend who's become very close to me and 3 of her friends. And somehow faith came up and I had an opportunity to say like, for me, I've had such a positive experience. I come from a background in a church where grace was the predominant message. It was so powerful for me that it's been really great. But also when I look around and I see everything that's possible in this world, all the goodness, all the beauty, even the food we're eating in front of us, it was this like gorgeous restaurant with way better than anything I could do, like gorgeous, octopus on the plate and all this crazy stuff.
Follow Sarah on IG. She knows all the good stuff.
Right. I'm like, who would create an animal with suckers, like 8 legs and suckers and this crazy head, like an ultimate creative, fun, playful, loving God that would just wanted to delight and knock our socks off like over and over and over again, And they were like, whoa. And it was like, I couldn't have had that moment while I was hosting at my own house because I would have been preoccupied. So I think there's a place for both. And that's really important. Or to be invited over to someone else's house where you can be cared for a little bit and then you can bring more emotionally to the table as well.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, Sarah. Especially like we talk a lot about assess and confess, like really knowing thyself, right? And you just diagnosed yourself as like, I'm a prone to be a Martha. So it's going to be hard for me to emotionally connect. So if I want to connect with you, this is what I'm going to do to connect. Like we should go eat somewhere else,
Yeah.
That would be a really great way for me to really connect with you. I think that's important for all of us, just to really know yourself and the ways that make it easy for you to build connection. And I think, there's just that's so important for us just to really know ourselves, and not to think like we have to be all things and to be all types. Like you called out your other family members who have different kinds of gifting that can be the present people at a party. And I think that's so good about hospitality, is kind of knowing who you're inviting or who's at the table, to know like, oh my gosh, this person is really going to help us synthesize this conversation, and to bridge connection. I can set the table and I can do this thing, but collectively, and I think that's what God intended for us, to really be able to be bridged together in different stories and where we're coming from and how God is storing us so beautifully and diversely. It's not all the same.
Yes. I mean, I think, I've been so blessed. I've lived a really rich and wonderful life. And I think one of my gifts is creating connection and bringing people in. But the thing that I've craved the most, that is really hard to achieve if you're not at least a little outgoing or a little bit hospitable or a little bit of the person like inviting, is that sense of community, like almost like a tribal, we're all the village, right?
Yeah.
And it was easy. It was a little easier in New York City, actually, because, you could walk to someone's house, and, you, even if people had small spaces, there was a lot of gathering, right? And when you live where I live in upstate New York, or if you're listening from the Midwest or the West Coast or anywhere else, and, everybody has their nice big house and their nice big yard, and they're separated. It's really a lot of work to create community. And I think it's just really important to, like, when you think about, I'm just thinking about holidays past, right? As we go into more of our Christmas, New Year's holidays, but holidays past, like Halloween, that's a time that people give themselves permission to just be like, make chili, open the front door, right? But why are we not doing that more often? We accept on that one night, everyone's going to be over sugared and grumpy, and nobody has high expectations. Let's just make chili and cornbread. Why are we not doing that in January, February, March, when we're really, we're cooped up, everybody needs that connection. The dip of the after holiday starts. Why are we not even doing it in December and just being like, hey, here's what I can pull off? For example, I have a tree trimming party every year, and it used to be, when all the children in our little friend group and community were small, it used to be kind of over the top. There was like towers of treats. I would do like huge stacks of cookies and all these beautiful displays. So that it would just feel kind of like the Sugar Plum Fairy had been there, and the children could just go and like pick things out, and they were running all over the house. I remember a friend of mine, I used to have white chairs around a dining room table, and all the kids were taking like chocolate covered strawberries. And she's like, do you want to wipe all their fingers? And I was like, no, just leave it. And then as I got older and like got nicer furniture, and my kids got older, and we were more flooded with Instagram images and perfection, I would be more worried about the white walls and someone smudging their hands and stuff. But last year I decided, like, you know what? I want to bring back that feeling. And we just had it outside, and I did it as a tree trimming brunch. Brunch for me is like the easiest entertaining hosting meal. It's
I mean,
eggs,
let
stratos.
me just plug the Sarah books. Sarah, you just crushed the brunch scene. Like pancakes, all the beautiful ways to like eat breakfast. Like you just need to get the books. If you don't have them, I was not like a super brunchy person, but all the things that you have inspired us to make, and they're so cozy and flexible and easily to do. So that's just a little.
Right. Like I'll do like a porridge bar, and there's like a warm, yummy porridge and like 7 beautiful toppings, but everyone can make it the way they want, or a waffle bar, and then there's all the toppings. And just anything where you can say to people, like, come as you are, be relaxed. Brunch or lunchy type meals are a little bit easier. They're less formal. They're daytime. You don't feel guilty asking people for help at the end of the meal, a little bit like, oh, does everyone mind just taking one plate in? I'll do the dishes, but if you could bring them in from the outside or whatever, that kind of thing. Whereas when we do dinners, right, or dinner parties, it's sort of like everybody has to scooch off and get to bed. Sometimes it can be overwhelming to be left with a pile of dishes. And I've even had, this is a true, just a full confession, those like poor me moments. I just did all this for my friends, right? And I know that's not how God intended our hearts to be when we are giving to others, but there can be those moments where you're like, I just did all this, and everyone left, and I have this huge pile, and I'm so tired, and we have school tomorrow, or whatever it is, you know? So I think the more we engage, it lightens our load. It feels more loving. It's more two-way, and you really become a family that way. And those are the moments when someone can say, "Oh my gosh, I'm really struggling with my marriage," or "We're concerned about this with my son. Have you ever been through anything like this?" Like, those are the moments when everyone's letting down their guard, when the next layer of connection and depth and love and, witness really can happen.
That's such a great point. I think it's that connection is so important so that we can really, like, it's not only we're just, sharing a meal and bread together, but we're sharing life together. And, having um all the beauty is super important, but I think, Sarah, you just called it, like, having that flexibility and that vulnerability to be able to really share our real lives, so that we can pray for one another and share one another's burdens as we kind of move through. And when you're raising young children and teens, and then you're shifting off into empty nesting, you need people to walk alongside you. And breaking bread is a place where, Jesus connected with people, and it's such a delight, right? And I think your perspective and around the delighting, I think, is so important to hold on to, especially in this season where it feels really, it can feel very burdensome with all the things we're doing with our kids, right? They've got
Right.
events in this season. There's just so many things that we are doing.
The concerts and the gift exchanges. I mean, there's so much.
The parties and all of the things that aren't even our choices, but we've got to go to anyway. But in the midst of it, I think having those little sweet pickups with a friend, or like yesterday, our friends just showed up to celebrate something for Jake, and we just all ordered Shake Shack, and that was an easy way for us to be together, share a meal, and have that kind of connection. And I think if we can free ourselves and allow ourselves to have that freedom, then we're going to have such much better memories and much more meaningful connection along the road. So
yeah,
Sarah,
and I just think now of so many people's houses we've been invited to, where, like, I've been to someone's house for a casual whatever, and it was like kind of obvious they didn't even pick up really, and it made me feel so happy. It made me feel so relaxed. I was like, wow, some people really are really unconcerned with what you think of their house. And so that's a weakness for me, because I'm concerned if you thought my house was messy. It shouldn't matter. Like, it really shouldn't matter, right? So though, just experiencing that from the outside, where you're like, oh my gosh, this is so refreshing. There's toys all over. There's 16 coats on one hook on the front door because there's no coat closet. Like, again, just really giving ourselves the grace that we give others, and that, that we would give our own mothers, looking back, like how much they did, right? And thinking like, wow, they kept a lot of balls in the air and they did it beautifully, right? Giving ourselves that perspective and that grace is so important.
So real. Love it, Sarah. So Sarah, we love to ask a couple questions in Storymaker land, and because you are such a reader as a kid, and I would love for you to share with Storymakers, like, what kind of stories sparked your imagination as a kid when you were a young reader.
Yeah, I mean, I was such a reader. I already shared my favorite Bible story, so I'll share some other stories. One of the stories that really captured me. I always loved stories about people that were different than me, grew up different in a different place, had a different cultural background, maybe lived in a different country. So I read a lot of stories about people who lived in New York City, even when I was a kid, even though I didn't know I would ever live there. And then I loved the story To Kill a Mockingbird. That's a story that I feel I first got so impassioned about human nature and human story, and really seeing the whole picture about a person before making a judgment. So I was just completely, enamored with Atticus Fitch and the whole story. I wrote an essay about it in, like, fourth or fifth grade. And I just remember that opening up the idea for me that, like, words are so powerful. I think that one of the stories that led me to become a writer. And, you know, I've always just been interested in stories about a little bit of struggle, but a lot of, you know, like a long path. In fact, the stories we were talking about from the Bible or my own, where there's surprises, where it's not predictable. Even like today, I don't read as much as I'd like novel wise. I read a lot of parenting books. I really don't read a lot of nutrition books. I'm really passionate about human development and the brain and neuroplasticity and these kinds of topics. So they're not as story driven. But even today, like a movie or a sitcom I would watch, like anything that's a bit too predictable is not for me. I always like the element of surprise. Um,
Yeah, I think, Sarah, you're wildly curious. In the
yeah.
best way. I'm a fellow curious person. Well, and I loved how you mentioned, I'll touch this back, when you guys look for rambly things out in your yard for the table setting. I think for parents who are looking at this season and just thinking, oh, it's going to be really taxing or whatever, I think elements of surprise can just de-escalate stressful returns from home or whatever. And even if you do like a chili or something very simple, I think having those elements of curiosity at the table is so good, which is, you know, I love stories that spark curiosity so much. And we can have a little bit of that, I think, at home too, with finding things that are just like non-normative, or like, why does my mom have this at the table? Like, what is this
Yeah.
about? The story
Yeah.
behind.
And even just breaking up your traditions. So for example, in my family, weeknight dinner is really different from the weeknight dinner I grew up in. My dad worked very early in the morning. He left at 6 in the morning every day. He worked a full long day, but he was home by like 6:15, and we would sit down, the six of us, to dinner every night. But my husband, we live 90 miles north of New York City. He goes to the city Tuesday to Thursday night. So there's many nights a week where I eat alone with my kids at the table, and we're shifting between, I'm taking one to ballet and one to soccer, et cetera, et cetera. So anytime I can add a little bit of elevated or reverse to the table and change things up, just keeps me inspired. And if I'm relaxed and inspired, my kids are more relaxed and inspired. So for example, I do sometimes light candles, especially during the winter, just at a regular Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night dinner when it's just me and my kids. Or if I say to my younger son, like, it's date night for me and you because Sissy's at ballet, and he'll be like, oh, cool. Am I cooking? Like, what are we cooking, mommy? Like, he gets really excited about it, to be like, you know, make it a special night with me. Or conversely, like with my daughter, who's a great eater, she eats everything, but she often feels rushed to like finish her meal. And, you know, she's very helpful. Put her dish in the dishwasher, get her ballet clothes on and go. I'll be like, we're doing snack dinner tonight. And you know what? Actually, since you're all done with your homework, we're all going to have snack dinner. We're going to listen to a podcast during dinner. And it's just a big platter of cheese and crackers and breadsticks. And like last night I do it a lot on Sunday nights. I had like a baba ganoush dip, and I had big pieces of romaine and celery and rice crackers. And then I had another one that had, you know, peanut butter with little sea salt and honey drizzled over it, and apples and celery, and, you know, just letting people just relax. So I think anytime you can change it up a little without messing your system up, kind of gets people there with you. And then you have more time for conversation. And snack dinner is great because it's also like, it's a manners free night. It's like, we can sit on the floor. We don't have to be so formal. You know, I don't have high expectations on manners from the kids. And I even will sometimes use things, you know, like last night, I'm not a big plastic person. I love glass and ceramic and stuff. But last night I was like, I'm not going to clean this peanut butter out of the thing at the end of
Yeah.
the night. Like, I want to enjoy myself too. So I'm going to put it in something like a paper compostable cup. So at the end of the night, we're just throwing it away. So again, giving yourself and your family little breaks, especially during this intensive high expectation season, I think is grace. It is an element of extending God's grace to everyone around you, especially like if you know yourself to be a parent with really high standards with manners or cleanliness or homework, whatever those high standards are. Like the kids are full up right now. Giving them grace, giving ourselves grace is ultimately extension of what God does for us every single day.
Oh, totally. We could just leave with that note. I mean, it's, it's having that expectation or vision. It's like our imagination is so important, but to imagine that God has a grace forward approach towards us gives us the capacity to have a grace forward approach towards our kids. And friends, follow Sarah on IG, because I've seen some of these snacky dinners, and I'm like, I did that for myself, and that looked like it didn't cause. I mean, didn't there was no prep time, in the same way that you're like,
Yeah.
but you could be emotionally available to your kids. And maybe what would be a fun thing too is, right, to have like a few things that one kid really loves and a few things that another kid really loves, and everybody's right there grazing together without having to be too fussy. What a gift that is. Completely.
And to be honest, snack dinner last night we had on Sunday night was a chance for me to be emotionally available to my husband, because I'm a parent who's guilty of like giving a lot of emotional attention to my children, and he's working, doing all the things, and he comes home and I'm like, you're a grown up. Like, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you're hungry. You're a grown up. You know where everything is, and sometimes, our partner needs a little bit more emotional engagement and a little bit more tenderness from us. And so the snack dinner allowed me I literally put my kids' snack dinner on a tray and I set up a projector for them. I'm like, it's a special night. You guys go watch their movie that they had picked out, and Daddy and I are going to have our snack dinner and watch it. And that was something that, we've really never done a date night inside the house, but it was like, my children are 9 and 13. There's no reason mom and dad shouldn't have a little emotional space at this point. And the snack dinner freed me up to do that. So.
Oh my gosh. I think you need a snack dinner book next. I love it. Or put it in the Substack. Everyone follow the Substack. That's going to be a huge trend. You heard it here first. I
love it.
And it's so true, especially it's just like we feel so overwhelmed by all the should the things that we ought to be doing. But at the end of the day, it's like we really want that connection, and we need to know, like, in a small way, when, this isn't, we're not saying like go heavy and deep, but it's just like small. It's all in the small wins. It's the quality versus the quantity. And recognizing the truth of your family life too, I think is so important, of saying like, oh, my husband is gone or my partner is gone 3 days a week. We're going to have like one great connection this week, and that's going to be awesome. And if there are more days than that, that's amazing too. But,
right.
setting the expectations in a way where you can have that you feel like everyone's tracking and growing together, I think is so important as well. Sarah, it was so great to have you. And I just want to highlight a few things, friends, before we roll off. I know it's the holiday season, so it's a perfect time to get one of my personal favorite books is Every Day is Saturday. And I took out the cover.
Yeah.
I'm such a neon.
Here's the cover. I'll show you the cover.
You can see the cover. I mean, guys, this is really worn. I've really used it. And so
this is my first one.
Oh my gosh, I know. Look at me. I actually
got the cover of that one too.
Because it got ruined from. Guys, we really use these things. They're amazing.
I know. I love it. I love knowing that you guys really cook from here. It's awesome. And Instant Family Meals is my newest one, but it's Instant Pot slow cooker, which is for January, February, March, April is when I heavily use this book. I rotate.
Oh, sorry. I will say for the Instapot book, I loved all the breakfasty things. That was such a surprise. Like the oatmeal or the porridge was amazing. Poached eggs. I mean, it just.
Oh, yeah. I love my breakfast time. That's my favorite.
So amazing. Well, Sarah, yeah, everybody go get it. Sign up for the Substack. Get inspired every day on IG with Sarah. It's amazing. And I love the vision of delighting in the creativity that God has given each and every one of us. And Sarah is wildly curious, and she brings beauty and story to life. And I mean, I just love reading the stories in the cookbook. I mean, I may not make all the things, but the stories help make meaning and know each other in a way and have a picture of where we all come from. So friends, check it out. And
Thank you, Mel.
It's so fun to have you, Sarah. Come back. And next time.
So good to see you.
Can't wait to play again. Bye, friends.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Sarah.